I've got coffee in my Montreal mug.
Montreal. Have you been to Montreal?
I have been to Montreal.
Ah,
I wouldn't,
nice.
I
How was
wouldn't
it?
buy a mug if I hadn't been to the place.
I thought you bought it intentionally as a prop for this episode.
I've been to watch the Mets.
The Mets, yeah.
I've been to Montreal.
And in
I've
the
never been to.
process, you're on a nice beige hype.
But you'll notice I'm not wearing any Reese merch because I've never been to your house.
No, very true, very true. I moved to get away from Gavin, basically. So
Hang on, you already live about 2 hours away from me.
yeah, it's true. I used to live. Actually, technically, I've moved closer. I used to be like 2.5, and now I'm 2. So
Well, there you go. Before you know it,
there
you'll
you
be in my bed.
there again.
Whoa.
Right, before I jump into Gavin's bed, Gavin actually came up with the idea for this week's episode.
We don't rehearse these intros at all, and it's as if we do.
It's almost like they're scripted. There is a teleprompter part of Riverside we can eventually use, but I don't think we need it. I think we're good
We
how
don't
we are.
need it.
The sexual tension is what powers us through all of these intros. Right. Yeah, well, no. Let's jump into the important stuff. The reason why everyone comes here and ignores the first 2 minutes of the podcast, which is NFL. Gavin actually came up with the idea for this week's episode, so I don't know if you want to lead on this and explain what you've done and what you've said.
I bloody love to lead on this. So so I was thinking basically because you know way more about the NFL than I do, I'm one of those fans that enjoys the nachos and beer side of NFL.
Mm-hmm. Whereas I can't stand for anything less.
I mean, in some respects, my connection to the NFL was very similar to someone who's been playing the lottery. You can't stop playing the lottery because one day you might win, much like the Cowboys might win again. You know,
that's true.
That's my connection to American football. I mean, I do love it as well, but whatever. So yeah, I had the idea which I totally didn't steal from one of the NFL pages, right? Which was your early pre-season hot takes for the 2024-25 season.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 5. I've given you a chance to think about the first 4.
Mm-hmm.
There's a secret 5th. So here we go. My first one is I want your 3 completely random hot takes for the 2024-25 season.
Okay. I have 3 for you. I have 3 very different ones that I've written down. I'm gonna save probably the most headliney and more controversial of the 3 till last, which is that Gavin will be Offensive Player of the Year. But no, prediction 1. So I have this as he's been a player that's been good the last few seasons. I think because of O-line issues, he hasn't really reached his potential. But I think that with the way this team has improved, that's going to change. So I've actually got Najee Harris, Steelers running back, leading the league in rushing yards. That's number 1. But my work, as you were saying,
I think he's underrated.
I think he's underrated.
Like I was really surprised. Like last season, I mean, obviously, I look at a lot of this through a fantasy league perspective. And I always look at Najee Harris as someone who's doing good things. And last season, there was a bit, like midway through the season, it was almost like I felt like he was being disrespected.
Yeah, I think that since he's been a Steeler, their O-line has been terrible. And, he still had 3 1,000-yard rushing seasons. So that's nothing to shy away from with a terrible O-line. And I think in the middle of the season last year, despite still confusion around who the Steelers had as a quarterback, they suddenly had that identity of rushing the ball with him and Jaylen Warren. And I think that Jaylen Warren's still that kind of, fast twitch, elusive guy, kind of like when you had that Zeke and Tony Pollard's combo of players. I think you still need Najee to be that slightly bigger bodied guy to get like a team over the line. And I think for me, when you talk about the offseason this year, everyone's talking about how improved the Bears were, how they've improved their line, how they've improved their receivers, how they've got better running back, better quarterback and all that. Always this dark horse, make the playoffs, all this kind of thing. But I think the Steelers had a really underrated offseason. And the last few years have built really well with young players and their free agency signings and all that. I mean, when you look at it, last year, you had Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph as your quarterback. Neither of those realistically have shown that Mason Rudolph had a weird, incredible end to the season, but hasn't really shown that he is a starting quarterback at that level who can, no team's going to trade for him to be their starter, for instance. And then suddenly you go into this season where your options are between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Now, say what you will about their talent, say what you will about where they are. They are a massive improvement over Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. If you can push the ball,
Justin Fields special teams.
Incredible special teamer taking back kicks for the Steelers, Justin Fields. But I think that's an improvement for them. And I think that when you've suddenly got a quarterback who can throw it to your receivers, I'll get onto in a minute, but like someone like George Pickens who can actually get open is, a true number one receiver.
Yeah.
That opens up the run game. And when you can open up the run game, then you give a guy like Najee Harris, who can do well in the pass game as well, but you give him the chance to actually rush the ball. So that was kind of point one, is like the improvement of quarterbacks. Then, when you look at the receivers, like I said, you've got your top guy in George Pickens. And suddenly behind it, sometimes you have teams like we spoke about with the Patriots, where they have a load of depth guys, but don't have that kind of true number one. You look at the Steelers, you've got George Pickens, your top guy, and Marquez Callaway, who had some good time at the Saints they signed. They've got Scotty Miller, who did some good things for the Bucs. Quez Watkins, that speed guy for the Eagles all those years. So you've got that from a receiver point of view. And then you look at, from a tight end point of view, Pat Fryermuth, that tight end, incredible rookie season, has still been there, still been solid. And then that monster blocker, Darnell Washington, the absolute massive dude who had that kind of viral clip of him pushing the sled in last year's draft, not this year in the combine. But you've got a monster blocker there. So suddenly you look at this and go, okay, well, Wilson or Fields is going into a situation where they've got two solid running backs, one to be your kind of key starter. Then all of a sudden you've got a bunch of receivers you can actually throw the ball to and a couple of tight ends. Like that is a solid situation for anyone.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Like
and just to finish
Derrick Henry might say you're wrong.
He might. He keeps trying. He's slid into the DMs a few times to tell me that he's unfair. And this was including after last week's episode when I said that if Derrick Henry was on the Ravens, they would have beat the Chiefs in that AFC Championship game. He just doesn't know when to quit a vendetta, to be honest. So Steelers, new offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, didn't do well as head coach of the Falcons, but when he is an offensive coordinator, he loves to run the ball, and he's that power run that's going to be good for picking those plays for Najee Harris. Then when you look at the draft and what the Steelers did this year, they picked 3 offensive linemen in the draft. They got Troy Fatanu at 20, Zach Frazier at pick 51, and then Mason McCormick at pick 119. So you've suddenly got the makings of a really good offensive line there, and they've invested in that offensive line. And as I say, when you look at Harris the last few seasons, all you need is him to have a solid line and a solid quarterback, and he's already done good things the last few seasons without that. So yeah, for number one, Najee Harris leads the league of rushing yards.
Give me two.
Number two. So pick 2 for this, the less controversial of the 3. Oh, I suppose, but I'm picking Joe Burrow to have an MVP season. Joe Burrow to get MVP.
I like that.
I think that when you look at how
I always back the Burrow.
You do back the Burrow. You love a Burrow. The Burrowers. That's there we go. That's the episode name.
Honestly, in a fix, I'll wheel out the Burrow.
You'll wheel out the Burrow. Wheel Burrow?
Carry on.
I don't know what to do anymore. But I think that when you look at how he bounced back from not only his rookie season, but that terrible knee injury in his first season, and the level that he can get to play at, making the Super Bowl, being that first team to pick the quarterback first overall and then make the Super Bowl the season after, is incredible. So I think you look at him bouncing back from his injury from last year, I think that he's just going to have the same level, the same kind of hunger. He's got that underdog mentality he's had the whole time. And I think that, he's been that kind of stick in the mud for the Chiefs and all that. And I could just see him having a fantastic season. At the end of the day...
How's the Bengals O-line looking?
Better. It is better. Let me just look at my notes here. You obviously got Amarius Mims, the Georgia offensive lineman in the first round, who's just an absolute mass of a human being. So they've had that investment. You have Orlando Brown Jr. they brought over last year. And then they signed Trent Brown as well, who's been, whatever you say about Trent Brown, he has been a starter in the league for a very, very long time and can still play at a high level when he's there. There's been some injury issues, but at the end of the day, you look at the level of where the O-line at. I think at the end of last year, they were in the bottom third of the league again from PFF on how good their O-line was. And so you've invested some pieces there along that line, and we've seen what Joe Burrow can do without barely any offensive line, in that season where he played at an MVP level.
Yeah.
Suddenly you've got some pieces there. You've got Jermaine Burton they picked up in the draft this year, a young guy with some off-field issues, but, potential first-round talent, and he's going to be the wide receiver 2 behind Jamar Chase. You look at the tight ends. Drew Sample's done some good things when players have had injuries. They picked up Mike Gesicki. I think he's still a solid tight end.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
They've got the pieces around there, and they went for a couple of tight ends as well in the draft this year. They got the 4th rounder Eric Hall, who again, injury issues. He had an ACL tear in the middle of last season, which kind of feels like that's why he fell. But they got some real stars and some pieces. And as much as again they lost Joe Mixon in free agency, who is an interesting person to note because he is mentioned in my next one of these. But Chase Brown last year and the running backs last year looked good when Joe Mixon wasn't able to play. So I think that it all sets it up to be a kind of underrated Bengals season. And I think when you've got a guy with such an underdog mentality coming off of an injury, I think that, Joe Burrow is gonna finally get that MVP.
I like it. Give me number 1.
Like it.
Give me that
right.
one.
So the more controversial of them, which is I've got the Chiefs this year being a first round playoff exit. And I've got the team that I think are going to beat them is the Texans. There's less really intense analysis on this, but I think it's just kind of a story that I want to buy into. And also, when you look at the Texans last year, in a rookie season for CJ Stroud, the things he did was incredible. The way he elevated that team was incredible. And you've got him going into a second season with some of those incredible rookies going into a second season. Your rookie head coach from last year going into a second season, suddenly that's a whole 2 off seasons with that team, with those players. And obviously the free agency signings they brought across were unreal. Stephon Diggs, Daniil Hunter, Joe Mixon. You've taken a team that literally got to the second round of the playoffs, destroyed the Browns in the first round of the playoffs, suddenly as an improved team. And I just believe in this Texas team. And I think at the end of the day, they beat the Bengals last year. Bengals are the Chiefs' kryptonite. Suddenly maybe the Texans are going to become the Chiefs' kryptonite and be that sort of stick in the mud in the AFC. But I think also as well is that we saw that one of the things that the Texans did really well last year was run the ball. You go into this season with Joe Mixon as your running back and the other players you've got and that second year of confidence from CJ Stroud, I think that they're just going to be able to run the ball incredibly well. When it gets to the playoffs, the one thing that can beat the Chiefs is if you have that running game. And I think that the Texans are just going to have that running game and be able to take it away. And we're not going to see that three-peat from the Chiefs.
And Dell will be back as well, won't he, after his injury?
Yeah. So suddenly you got.
I think he was a massive loss for them on such a ridiculous play as well, wasn't it? And honestly, that was huge. I hope the coach learned from that moment.
Yeah. I think you look at what they did without their top players. There was a few games missing Nico Collins and Tank Dell and all that. And now you go into this team.
Destroyed my fantasy team.
Another story of Gavin trying to just do something fantasy and losing all his players.
Colin Stroud, and I think Singletary was doing good things as well, and it all just fell apart.
Oh, yeah, because there was that game, wasn't it, where I remember you messaged me and went, oh, well, who do I start, Singletary or...
I had both.
Oh, you had who was the other guy? I can't remember his name, but
I had them both, and basically I had two guys out. I had Singletary, and I benched him. The other guy came in and obviously did all the good stuff. And
the classic, yeah.
Right. Bad year for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think I think it's no team has ever three-peated, and I think that the Chiefs again they're going to be in the playoffs. They're probably going to win the division. I don't see anyone else in that division having improved enough to be able to knock the Chiefs off. But I think the Texans have got such confidence going into this year, and I think that there's a humility that CJ Stroud had, which means he's going to keep learning, and D'Amico Ryans as coach is going to keep learning, and I think it's just a sort of powerhouse in the making, basically. Even if they didn't sign any other free agents, just round 2 of that would have been great, but they've improved so much in the off season that I just think it's hard to bet against them.
I'm not going to question you.
Okay. You used to. You did, and then we learned never to do that again.
Because I said let's go left. You said let's go right. We went left. We don't talk about what happened.
No. God, I love California.
Never go there again. Okay, right. Number 2. I want your offensive and defensive rookies of the year.
Right. So at first, like this one took more thought. I at first I thought that do I go really rogue and do like a Puka Nakua situation, go for like a fourth, fifth rounder or something, and just pick that? But I thought there was two kind of guys that glared out to me in terms of who I think will be that. So for offensive rookie of the year, I put Brock Bowers, tight end, picked by the Raiders. I think that he was that in well the last few seasons. I guess he was that monster tight end, that potential Travis Kelce type guy that people are looking at and already calling him a Hall of Famer for his plays. I know that's ridiculous, but it's just that level of kind of expectation for him. Um, with the Raiders going into, it's nice to talk about the Raiders in a positive light for once. With the Raiders going into year 2 with Antonio Pierce and Aiden O'Connell and all that, there's some stability there, and I think that when they got rid of Josh Jacobs, one of the reasons it was for is because they believe in Zamir White, and Zamir White did fantastic things last year when he was the starting running back. So I think the identity is going to be running the ball, and at the end of the day, Aiden O'Connell as a quarterback is still very green. He's only going into year 2. He was rookie quarterback last year. There's belief in him. But I think that what was missing last year for Connell was that sort of dump off tight end, that player that he could rely on no matter what. And I think that Brock Bowers is going to be that guy for him, or whoever ends up being the starter. And I think that he's just going to be that similar tight end season to what happened with Carl Pitts a few years ago. I could just see Bowers being that target for Aiden O'Connell and being that dump off target, so that they could always make yards and having just a ridiculous amount of receptions. So the Raiders have been missing that since Darren Waller left in free agency. He was traded to the Giants. So I think that it's the Devontae Adams at the end of the day, that top guy. But when you've got that top guy, suddenly that allows for space over the field. And if a team's looking at it and going, okay, we've got to defend Devontae Adams as well as this tight end, that's when suddenly you create those matchups, those Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, who do we double team sort of matchups. And I think that that's going to be a problem for defenses going against the Raiders. I like the pick for the Raiders to just go, let's just get the top guy in this draft. Let's just not worry about, let's get the guy who everyone is talking about and could have potentially got even earlier in the draft, and then put him in and make him offensive rookie of the year to appease me.
Give me a defensive guy.
Defensive guy. I looked up his name a couple of times. I don't want to butcher it, but defensive rookie of the year, I'm saying Laiatu Latu, the edge for the Colts. So he's an interesting guy because I feel like there's such a direct comparison for him within the league with his position as well. But basically, he had to medically retire a few years ago. Went to a different college, went to UCLA, and then was medically cleared to play again, and has just been a monster ever since. And one of the things why, he went here but didn't go higher and could have gone higher was obviously the injury concerns for teams. But I think when you look at that Colts defense, they've been very, very good the last couple of years. The Colts last year were kind of a bit of a surprise, to be in the last week of the season and be able to go, okay, well, if we win this game, we're basically in the playoffs. For a team that, lost their rookie starting quarterback and it was a bit more of a rebuild year for them. It was quite impressive, to be honest. And I think that suddenly you get a guy who can be the cornerstone of this defense. In a year where, Anthony Richardson has had a full off-season, and where, I think this guy is just going to not have the injury concerns, because he really reminds me exactly of Jalen Phillips, the Dolphins player. Again, loads of injury concerns from college. Had to stop playing the game for a while, came back, and then was a first-round pick. And although he's had some injuries in the league, when he's on the field, he's an absolute monster for the Dolphins. And so I think it's going to be the same thing, and he's going to be the defensive rookie of the year.
Very much like me when I'm on the field, an absolute monster.
It was actually when I put pro comparison, I put Gavin down underneath this.
I'm not playing any sports. I'm just being a monster.
Just being a monster. Just
I don't know where I'm going
rules.
With this. I really don't know where I'm going.
You were just like, I'm the guy. I'm the pick.
Number 3.
You can do, if you like. You can do.
Hey, Reese, give me your comeback player of the year.
Kirk Cousins.
Ooh, comeback?
Yeah. Achilles tear, like in his mid-30s, started with a new team. Realistically, when you look at Cousins, like, at the end of the day, that doesn't mean I'm saying the Falcons are going to win the Super Bowl. However, you've got a guy who, when he's a starter in the league, is very good. And to be honest, last year when he was starting, a lot of the issues were their defense of why they didn't beat the Eagles, why they didn't end up beating the. They did beat the 49ers in the end, didn't they? I think they beat the 49ers in the end on that game. But
Don't ask me these
but
things.
regardless, like that Vikings team, it was a real what if of like suddenly things felt like they were clicking, and then you get an Achilles injury, and then
Hmm.
as in the cruel world of sport, it all derails. But I think at the end of the day, he comes off that injury, he goes into a good situation in Atlanta. In terms of the offensive line, the Atlanta offensive line is one of the better in the league from last season. They're kind of poised to
I mean,
do the same kind of things this year.
there's a lot of pressure on him this year, isn't there? Given the draft pick.
Well, that's why I think the Michael Penix Jr. Draft pick, I think that's almost motivation. I think when you look at sports players and what they do, for a player, a guy like Kirk is like, okay, I've got this slight chip on my shoulder because no matter how good I've played in my career, there's still people who are saying that I'm not good
I,
enough.
I think he's always played like that. He's always had that.
Yeah,
Obviously, there's like that one sort of incident. Was it How Do You Like That? Wasn't it?
yeah. You like that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's followed him throughout his career, isn't it?
Yeah,
He's in some respects, he's definitely had a better career than I think people give him credit for. That being said, he's never really come close to winning it, has he? It's not like
no,
yeah,
no, no.
and
There's been that. Yeah,
like you'd probably put him in the same league as Dak Prescott. Yeah, it feels to me like people expect Dak Prescott to win the Super Bowl more, whereas
yeah.
Kirk Cousins, he doesn't. He's like I don't know. He's not in the top tier, but he's. I mean, I hope he has a good season. I'm not gonna challenge it. I love the fact that he has that challenge put on him now. So he's got to have a good season, hasn't he? He's
Yeah,
literally
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and
I,
I think, as you say, because of throughout his career and how he's been positioned, I think that it's just another kind of thing to add to that motivation. You know, he goes to a team as well. We've seen what he can do with a top receiver. He goes to this team. He's got Bijan Robinson, Kyle
yeah.
Pitts, Drake London, all the guys in the world to throw to, all the guys in the world to rush the ball. Like a great offensive line, probably better than what you had at the Vikings. The Vikings one was pretty good. So overall, it's you go there with a first time offensive coordinator in Zach Robinson, but he was with the Rams for the last few seasons as different coordinators for their offense. So that's not a
Oh,
bad place to go from, and a bad person in Sean McVay to learn under. So
it's in the book now.
it's in
It's
the
written
book.
down.
It's written down. History has been
History.
rewritten.
We'll see. Okay, right. Number 4.
Right, 4.
Name your dark horse to make a playoff run. And
Dark.
now I'll determine whether this horse is dark enough. Right?
I'm not playing this game again.
Because don't be coming in here with the 49ers.
Oh yeah, man. Dark horse type playoff team, the Chiefs.
Go on and
You
hit me.
go right. Tennessee Titans. That's my pick. Dark horse playoff run
Ooh.
team.
Okay, now we're talking. Show me your workings
Yeah.
out.
Okay, so you got Brian Callahan, new head coach for them. Obviously, Mike Vrabel, they left the team last year. He was the Bengals offensive coordinator for the last few seasons. So you've got a guy who knows how to handle a offense with weapons and knows how to develop a young quarterback at the end of the day. He would have been there when Joe Burrow was in his rookie season and gone from there and helped to develop the guy at the end of the day. And the Bengals has obviously been great on offense the last few seasons. So I think you've got him as a head coach. I think that's good for the development of Will Levis. At the end of the day, they were 6-11 last year. Will Levis in that first game showed those flashes. They beat Miami. They had like good things that happened.
I had him on the bench, by the way, in that game.
Oh, of course, yeah, but who could have predicted that?
Was it
No one
like-
could have.
Was it like 4 touchdowns?
It was 4 passing touchdowns, yeah,
4 passing touchdowns.
and deep
I had him
touchdowns
on the
as well.
bench.
Yeah, it's the cruel mistress of fantasy football, which is mostly what Gavin gripes about. But yeah, so you got again a rookie quarterback going into year 2 with a coach who coached Joe Burrow as a young player. You look at the running back room. Of course, there's no Derrick Henry, but you've got Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears, Haskins as well in there. So from a running back point of view, you've got those elusive guys and a real. Either Pollard becomes the number 1 guy, like he did in my Madden league, where I scored 30 touchdowns with him in a season, where I was playing as the Titans and rebuilding them.
We got Zeke back. It's fine.
There you go. Yeah, you got the thick boy trundling down the road. But so a running back point of view, you're in a. You remind me of Zeke. Same powerful thighs. There he is. So you've got the running back room's looking good. Chiga Okonkwo, obviously at tight end, has been that solid young player for them. In terms of the receiver room, probably the most improved part of that team. You pick up Calvin Ridley, you pick up Tyler Boyd, all ready to go with Hopkins, who
Yeah,
last year we
yeah,
showed like Hopkins has a competent quarterback. He can still be that potential number one guy. So you get a lot of players there around there. Now, the one thing that I think is probably the most improved is you look at the O line from last year and it was terrible. Arguably the worst in the league, or one of the worst in the league. During free agency, they picked up Lloyd Cushenberry, who, again, perennial starting center in the league. So that's a core guy to be at the middle of your O line. JC Latham, the tackle they got in the draft really early with pick 7. So that shores up the left side or right side of your O line, whatever you want to do. You've got Sadiq Charles in there at guard. Has had some injuries, but again, solid when he plays. And then Peter Skoronski is also there at guard as well. So 4 out of 5 positions, realistically, you've got solid players in there. And, there's something that can start to develop there. And you've seen how as soon as that line starts clicking together, then suddenly it changes the whole dynamic for a team. And I think that, for an offense, that realistically was more of the issue. I think that the Titans defense has loads of good pieces. Jeffrey Simmons is obviously the cornerstone of that defense, but they picked up the Darius Sneed from the Chiefs as well in the offseason. And then you've got Landry there. So, yeah.
Again, looking at it from a fan point of view, not that I'm a fan of the Colts, but it will be really interesting to see how they transition from Derrick Henry to Pollard. Completely different backs. I like it. I like it. It'll be interesting. Just quick, how far do you think they're going to go?
Oh, I don't think they win. I took this as dark horse team to make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to win a playoff game. I think they'll make the playoffs. So I think it'll be like that 10-7, 9-8 season where they sort of surprise and just sort of get into the playoffs. But it's more of a sign of things to come versus them suddenly going and making a run.
Right. Okay, cool. Like it. I like it.
Right.
I think you're wrong. I think the Cowboys are going to be the surprise because no one in the NFC East has won the NFC East twice in a row for like 20 years. I saw that the other day, and I'm shoehorning it in somehow, and they're going to surprise everyone by going all the way and then losing in some painful manner in the Super Bowl in, I don't know, some ridiculous Tony Romo comes back to hold the field goal to win the game and he fumbles it and then he tries to run and he gets 1 yard from the end zone and gets tripped and then there's mine. Just put that one in the books. That's my
I'll add that. That was my question for you. And to be honest, it's got to a point where no one now, I don't think anyone actually expects the Cowboys to make the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. So if they do, that is a surprise. So
exactly.
There you go.
Right, okay. Right. So number 5. Let's finish this bad boy off, right? This is the one that I've not given you any prep for, right? Mm-hmm. Which is the first coach to be fired this season?
Oh, oh wow. That's an interesting one. Let me have a think. I can't see it being any of the new hires. So who's someone that's kind of a bit more on the hot seat?
Are we going back to the Cowboys now?
Imagine it's just like McCarthy. To be honest, it could very well be McCarthy because realistically, you've seen the last few seasons when he's had that kind of all-star roster, they haven't been able to, or I say your Cowboys haven't been able to win it and haven't been able to get there. I'd argue that this is probably the worst roster for the Cowboys you've had in the last 4 or 5 seasons.
What's his contract situation? Hasn't he got 1 year left?
Let me have a look. Because it could be. Let's pull this up.
I don't think he's been extended. And do you remember? Obviously, we haven't talked about this before, and I just dropped the Cowboys in there.
Yeah.
But remember how in pre-season they were all in, but they really weren't all in at all. If anything, they were all out. and so then you kind of you look at that and you kind of go, okay, maybe they didn't actually want to commit too much money to Mike McCarthy's plan because maybe Mike McCarthy isn't a long-term plan.
No.
And maybe he's got 1 season to make it work with whatever he's got, and then he's done.
Well, at the end of the day, it's hard because it's like, is Jerry Jones really going to turn around and go, oh yeah, let's keep this guy when we've not won it? As much as Jerry Jones has a lot of control over the Cowboys, probably more than any other owner, it's still in his head. He's probably going, well, we're not winning it. We're not getting there. And then suddenly this offseason, the players that you lost weren't really replaced a lot of the time. So, I'm looking at this there. In mid-January 2024, owner Jerry Jones said he would retain McCarthy as head coach, saying the team is very close and capable of achieving our ultimate goals, which is just like the usual, political written bullshit statement. Like, it doesn't really say anything. Yeah, I'm gonna say McCarthy, and I think I'm interested to. I want to finish off by hearing what you think of that, and if McCarthy is fired, do you think that's positive for the team, or do you think it's negative, or do you think it doesn't really make a difference?
I mean, I think the thing is, like we were just saying, it's been so long now since they won a Super Bowl. It's almost water off a duck's back, isn't it? Like we're just bouncing from sort of like 10-7. We're consistently 10-7 or 11-6. We're just that year in, year out. They took forever to get rid of Garrett.
Yeah,
like Jason, that was ridiculous. Just bouncing again on consistently with Garrett, it was ridiculous. I mean, he seems like a lovely guy, but it's got to be more than that. I'm really confused. I'm really confused by the Cowboys. I think it's really, really difficult to like you look at last season. We were so good at times, but then we were never good against great teams. And I think surely the ownership see that. They must see that and kind of go, okay, and that's why I think they're rolling with it. I think he could be the first to go. I don't know. Has Jerry Jones done that halfway through a season before?
It doesn't really feel like a kind of honourable Cowboys way, does it?
Did Wade Phillips come in halfway through a season?
I can't remember. Your history of the Cowboys would be more...
Any opportunity to mention Wade Phillips' dad's name is always one I'll take, by the way. His dad's name was Bum.
Bum Phillips?
Bum Phillips.
I gave you one of those in New York.
Yeah. So okay, right. So we're looking at Mike McCarthy. You're nailing Mike McCarthy to the wall. No other alternatives. You're basically telling me that I may as well not bother watching the NFL this season.
Well,
thanks for crushing my dreams.
I think you're very realistic when it comes to how the Cowboys are going to do, and I think that I'm just feeding into the realism at the end of the day.
The whole bringing Zeke back thing is just weird, isn't it? Like how often does that happen when a veteran comes back? I don't, especially at running back. Like we'd written him off because he was done, really. And what's he done since? He's I don't know. It's weird.
Some things, but not.
Mike McCarthy is locked in.
Yeah, Mike McCarthy. And do you want an honourable mention of someone, or like another one just to throw into the hat we can chat about eventually?
Hit me. I reckon we got about 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna hit you with one. I'm gonna hit you with one, and then we'll explain it and chat about it a bit more because they're a good team to chat about another day. Sean Payton.
Okay. Yeah, we'll dive into that because interesting.
Yeah. So I'll leave you with that. Sean Payton, I think, will be fine. Yeah, no, I
didn't see that coming.
Yeah, well, there you go. We'll dive into that in another episode. I know Gavin has to leave to get a train and cavorse on whatever he's going to do. Thanks for joining us for another episode. Follow us on Instagram at ClutchdownPods to see reels from the episodes and jump into the discussion about different elements that we've spoken about. On Spotify, Clutchdown Podcast to get the new episode. There's new episodes every week. And if you want to watch and see our beautiful faces every week as well, at Clutchdown Pod on YouTube is where you can find us. Do that, and we'll see you again next week.
Mold.